Here's my no-sew tutorial on how to reupholster your dining room chairs. This is what it started out as, and this is what I ended up with. These are the tools I used in the tutorial. A staple gun, electric, will help save your hands. A hammer. A nail remover that I use to remove the staples. Screwdriver to remove the screws from the chair. And I use this to get the staples out and underneath them. Has a flat head for me to be able to hammer into the staple, much smaller than using this, and a stitch remover. So here's the chair. As you can see, it's still attached. I flip it over and you can see the screw holes to remove the chair. Here's 2 screw holes to remove the backing. Go ahead and remove the screws to remove the seat and the backing from the chair. Put aside all the screws that you take out for later. These will come in handy when it's time to reinstall the seats and back. Now that you have the screws out, you're going to pull this out and just wiggle it out. It's held by dowels at the top, so wiggle back and forth and pull, and you see it come out, and there you go. There's dowels that hold it in place at the top. And as you see, we're going to remove all these staples later in the tutorial. With all the seat and backing off, I'd like to take the time to clean my chair. And if you have kids like mine, they paint and you get these stubborn paint splatters. I just use a household nail file and buff that right out so it doesn't scratch the wood. As you see, it comes out perfectly fine. Now that the chair is clean, I'm going to go ahead and remove all these staples from the underside. I didn't get this backing, so I'm going to reuse this and remove the staples as carefully as possible. So the tool I talked about earlier, if you see, it's hard to get underneath the staples, and that's where your hammer comes in handy. You're going to grab your hammer and you're going to put this right underneath the staple here. So just lean it up at an angle that's perfect and hammer it in. It just pops under there and pops it up. Really nice. Next, you're going to grab your nail remover tool and you're going to slide that underneath. There's 2 different sides and you see that pops up. I do a little twist to pull it out and it's done. Now we're going to go ahead and remove all the staples. I like to first hammer them all up and then come back around with my staple remover and pull them all up. Now that I've got all the staples popped up, I'm going to use this tool, get underneath each staple and pull up and twist it out if I need to. Okay, one last staple here that I didn't see, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop that up and get that removed. And what you're going to notice here is that because the foam, I also didn't get foam for my chairs, is quite old, it leaves a lot of this disintegrated dust. I don't want to get that all over, so I'm going to take it outside and shake it off. Okay, so I've cleaned it. It's a lot better now. I'm just going to fold this up and put it aside to use for later. As you see on the underside of the chair, your fabric is stapled into the bottom of the chair multiple times around the corners and edges. You can either remove the fabric by cutting it away with the stitch ripper, it's very sharp, and sliding it across, or you can use scissors and cut away from your fabric. This is my 3rd chair, and even though it's my 3rd chair, I prefer to remove the staples. But if it's your first chair, you might want to remove the staples and use the fabric as a template for your new fabric to cover the chairs. Here we go. We're going to remove the staples just as before. There's a lot more staples on the corners, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the sides and leave the corners of the chair until the end. So as I was taking the staples out, I noticed that they broke. I'm going to use the pliers to grab this one. It comes out just like that. The other one, on the other hand, is a bit too short that I can't grab onto it. So what you can do is you can grab your hammer, hammer it in, feel it, make sure it's not poking out, and keep going. So I notice that there's a bit of dust here. I'm going to take this out and shake it before moving on to the next step. Just going to check to make sure there's no staples that I've missed, remove the corners of the fabric, and then we'll start reupholstering. Here is the staple gun that I use for the reupholstering portion of this. Make sure it's off on, check that it's full of staples. My first chair I went and used this manual staple gun. My hands were so sore and a little bit blistered, but it does do the trick. I prefer to use either one that's powered by a compressor or an electric one. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to center the fabric on the chair, make sure that you're happy with how much is coming around all edges, and then you're going to start stapling it to the chair. So I start in the middle of my side here. So I pull it tight, staple it in. I push down on it to try and get the stapler in nice and tight into the piece of wood. If it is poking up a bit, you can grab your hammer and just hammer that down into the wood. And then you go across to the other side, pull it nice and tight. And so we're just going to pull it tight here, and then we're going to staple it in. And then what I like to do after I've got the staple in is to turn it over and make sure that it is all smooth so that I don't have any folds or anything happening on the other side of the chair. So we'll just flip that over, and as you see, it's a little bit wrinkly. So we're just going to smooth that out by pulling it on the two sides that I didn't staple. Smooth that out, and then you flip it back over and continue your process. So I start in the middle and then staple out to the edges. So after each side, before you move on to the fourth side, you're going to turn it over, stretch it out, rub out any wrinkles so that you can make sure the fabric is nice and smooth. We're going to leave the corners at the end so we can pull everything nice and tight around the seat of our chair. So as you're stapling along sides here, don't forget to keep looking to make sure that there's no wrinkles or anything that's formed. You want to make sure that your fabric is nice and tight before you continue stapling it. So now that I'm done all the sides, I'm just going to turn it over, make sure it's nice and smooth, that I like how it looks, and then we're going to move on to the corners of our chair. We're going to take the corner, and you can fold it over multiple ways. It's kind of like wrapping a present. Once you got it where you like it, you go and staple it, fold that over, and put another staple in there. And again, you just take these little flaps, fold them, staple them down so they're nice and tight. And you're going to do the same thing to this side. You're just not sure if I want to have it that way or just fold it entirely. So if you see, you can just play with it, sit it up, see how it folds. I like how that's looking. There's less wrinkles there. So this is the fold I'm going to go with. You see, you smooth that all out, pull it tight, and then staple it into place. So here we go. Staple it here and then fold it over and get that back into place. I'm going to do this on the rest of the four corners. So as you're folding your sides down, you might notice a little bit extra fabric. You can staple it down or cut it off, and then just so you know, when this goes over top, it's going to be covered, so you don't have to be too picky about how that looks. I'm going to move on to the last of my corners, and then we're going to put on the backing. So on this corner, I just noticed that the padding was bunching up a bit, just adjusting it with my fingers before I folded over. I didn't like how bulky it was, so I'm smoothing it down, running the stapler across it to keep it smooth and tight, and then stapling it into place. Now I've got all 4 corners done. I like how that looks. I think it looks great, and it's time to put on the backing. So you're going to center your backing so that it's covering all the edges of the fabric. Make sure that you have it where you want it. I didn't like how this poked out, so I'm just going to staple it down in a fold here, cover it up, and that to me is a lot better. Put it where you want to and start stapling. So I'm just stapling in the last of the bit here on the backing. Once I'm done this, we're going to go and put this on the base of the chair, see how it fits, center it, and then screw it down. So here's the base of the chair, put it on, give it a little wipe off with all the dust that was on it, and it's looking good already. Now it's time to secure it to the chair. I like to do this by putting it on my lap so that my lap adds a bit of resistance as I'm twisting the screw into the base of the chair. I'm going to go ahead and screw in all 4 corners. Okay, so I've got the seat screwed to the base of the chair. It's time to move on to the back of the chair. I've got the backing of the chair that I showed earlier. It's got staples on all 4 sides and the dowels that were on the top of the chair. I'm going to use the hammer, the screwdriver to remove the staples, plus the staple remover, nail remover, and I'm going to use a stitch remover to cut the holes where the dowels are in the new fabric. Let's get started. So I started trying to remove the staples from this angle, which was a bit awkward. I'm using this nail remover just to get in under the nails. I'm not needing the screwdriver right now. As you see, one side's thinner than the other. Just pick the side that works best for you. Dig it in underneath the stapler and just use the bend of it to help get the staple out. So not a lot of effort required. I then moved to this angle, which is a lot easier. Some of the staples, again, because they're old, were breaking, so I had to use the pliers as well. And I'm just tossing them in the garbage beside me as I go, digging them up with this, pulling them out with pliers, and then we're going to continue on to the other sides. So I've got the top done, and now I'm moving on to the sides. I'm just going to use a screwdriver, pull up each staple, and then I'm going to follow through with the pliers and pull each of these out so you can see what it looks like pulling it out with the pliers in case you don't have a nail remover like I do. So you're going to use the pliers here, and instead of grabbing and pulling up, which takes a lot of energy and force, you're just holding it and kind of twisting it out, or using kind of like a teeter-totter motion with the pliers, and that's going to move them out a lot quicker. So on the bottom side, I'm just going to use the screwdriver, the flathead screwdriver, and pull up each of these staples, and then I'm going to come in behind with the mini nail remover, and you're going to see how quick this comes out. So there we go, that's all the staples there. Grab the nail remover, bring in, do a twisting motion, so that's so I twist it towards the side that's still stuck in, or you can just pull straight up. Sometimes they get a bit stubborn and you need a twist, and sometimes you need pliers. But that's how you can use either tool for removing the staples. So we're going to keep doing that on the side here, and then we're going to take this fabric off. So I'll continue doing this and we'll move on to the next step. Now that I've got all the staples removed, I can go ahead and pull this fabric off the back of the chair. So as you see, that comes off nice and easy. I'm going to grab the stitch remover, and you can go and remove the stitches so that you can use this as well as a template for those of you that would prefer to sew just as this is and then staple into place. But I'm going to not sew, and I'm just going to staple the fabric on, which you'll see in the next steps. So if I was going to use this as a template, I would actually just cut a long piece of fabric and fold it rather than sewing it on 3 sides. You could sew it on 2 sides. So I'm opting of doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to center the backing within my fabric here. And then I'm going to go and staple one side of it. So I'm just smoothing it all out, making sure that I like it, and pulling it nice and tight before I go and fold down the tops. So you see I folded down the tops on either side, and then I'm going to staple that in place to keep my fabric nice and taut in the one spot. I'm going to pull the fabric tight, put the staple into the groove, and then we're going to take the fabric and pull it tight on the front and back, making sure that it's even on both sides. Now I don't want the seam first in the front of the chair, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it coming from the back to the front to be the underside of the fabric. And as you see, I just pull it tight, staple it into place, make sure it's nice and even and smooth on the top front sides there. So now that I've got the fabric even how I want it, I'm just going to take the staple gun and staple it into place down the side here. What I want to do is I want to spread my staples out so that when I'm doing the other side of the fabric, I'm not accidentally stapling them over each other. Now that I've putting in the last staple on the side here, I'm going to take the fabric that's going to cover the front of my chair, pull it across, make sure it's nice and even on both sides, just like I did on the back side, and smooth it out. I didn't like how long this fabric was, so I'm just going to trim it up to make sure that there's not a lot of bulk on the side of the chair. So I have these handy clips, they're sewing clips, and I'm just going to clip the side of the fabric here, making sure that I don't pull it too much and end up not having enough fabric on the one side. I like to fold the fabric to make a nice seam, and again it's a little bit too bulky here, so I'm going to trim it up, fold it, stretch it, and staple it into place. And that's how you end up making sure that you don't have a raw seam. So here you go. I'm just folding it into that groove on the side of the chair that's naturally there and stapling it into place. As you see, I just folded the fabric over and pulled it tight to the bottom and stapled it to the bottom just so I can keep it, that nice seam, in a straight line. And then I'm going to just go ahead and staple it all into place. And I'm just going to do the same thing to this side, trim it back, fold it, staple it into place, so then I can continue on the top side of the back of the chair. Okay, I'm just putting the final staple here, smoothing it out, and we're going to go and look at the top side of the chair. As you see here, these flaps are quite large, so again, I'm going to trim it down so that we don't have a huge bulk there. The dowels are in the way, so I'm just going to pull these out. Now I can pull the fabric nice and tight. So just like I did with the other side, I'm going to take from the back and pull it to the front so it's underneath the fabric that goes from front to back. Just have a clean seam. Pulling it tight, stapling it in the middle, and then I'm going to just make note of where the dowels go in to make sure I don't staple into that area. Pull the fabric nice and tight across and staple it into place. Now that I've got this in place, I'm going to fold this over here so that the seam is nice and tight. I'm going to go and make sure that the ends are each done and staple it right into the side there, making it nice and tight, just making sure that it's all folded nicely. Here we go, fold it in, pull it tight, make sure I've got a nice clean seam on the corner there, staple it into place, and then I can go ahead and fold the rest of this up. I'm going to use these clips to mark out where the dowels go in, so I make sure that I don't put staples over the dowel holes. And I'm going to go ahead and again fold this to make a nice clean seam, trim up any bulk, and I'm just going to use a clip on the middle there so I can keep the fold and get the ends nice and down and stapled. So it might not look as clean as if I had sewn this, but again, these edges are going to be hidden by the back of my chair. So now I take the stitch ripper tool and I just feel where the dowels are going to go, and I'm just going to cut out the extra bulk of the fabric there so that the dowels can get in here nice and smoothly. The dowels on the other chairs actually came in and out without any extra tools, but these ones need a little bit more force, so go ahead and use a hammer. Just make sure you don't hammer too hard that you're damaging the dowel. Like with the other one, I'm going to cut out the fabric and hammer it into place, and then we're going to be ready to install this. Okay, our chair is done. As you see, it can't go in from the front, so make sure you remember how it went in. You're just going to line the dowels up with the holes at the top here, push it in, and just squeeze it into place. And that's it. Other than screwing it into the bottom, the chair's done. So I'm just going to show you here, of course. Screw it in, say hi to Snowy. He's walking around supervising me as I reupholster this chair, waiting to obviously sit on it. But screw the back into place and your chair is complete. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Here's the finished look of my chair. I'm very pleased with it. Thank you.